It's our final episodes week. We'll give you some tips and talk about some of the strategies to implement in the final 2 weeks of the season. We'll also give you our waiver wire picks, and Ruvain will have his injury report too with some actionable advice. Our final regular season episode of Beat the Shift this season is coming up next. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast, presented by Fangraphs. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. I just finished up my softball season at night. We were 7-1, 7-1 in the Sunday League, and I tabulated that regular season since May 24th, my teams went 22-2. Pretty good. We did win a semifinal and lose a championship in each, so 24-4. That's not bad for all games played in leagues over a couple months.
So you're saying you're the 2001 Seattle Mariners where you win a whole bunch of games but have nothing to show for it.
Thanks. Well,
No problem.
Let's see. I got playoffs coming up, so we'll
listen,
see.
My softball team got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, so there's that. So yeah.
I'm sorry, man. All right. Well, hopefully we'll put something on the mantle this year. But no guest this week. We're gonna do a shorter show. This will probably be our last regular season show. We will, of course, have a wrap up for the season shortly after, but this will be our last regular season show. And we're going to call it the last week's episode. So we're going to talk a little strategy about what to do in the last couple of weeks specifically, as you might get down to 1 or 2 weeks left. We'll do our waiver wire, pitcher preview, and injury report. So let's just start with our strategy tonight. And, when you're coming down to the stretch in a roto league, you have the option or you have the ability to gain points in the standing, but there's also the possibility of losing points. And I guess we can call that defending your points. Question is there a difference in the standing with gaining, with attacking the gaining versus making sure you defend the ones that you have that might be tight? What do you think?
Well, I'm going to be Captain Obvious here, that it depends on how much you gain and how much you lose. If you're in danger of losing more points, you should really try to protect those points as much as you can, because even if you gain in one area, you may start losing in another. So specifically, if let's say you want to try to gain in wins and strikeouts, so you're throwing all these 2-star pitchers and all the pitchers who are getting all the starts, you may gain some wins and strikeouts, but you may be hurting yourself in ERA, you may be hurting yourself in WHIP, and you may even lose some points in saves if you're not playing all your closers, if you have any closers out there. So you really have to see what's the best for you and see who you have to pass to get these points you're going to gain and who's going to pass you on the points you're going to lose. I think that's the key.
Yeah, so, again, we talk about it before, but it's, and I guess it should be obvious, but, you do have to look not just at the points where you can gain, that, losing points is an issue, and when you have to fortify which statistic you want to throw more on, you do have to take a look at the ones that you are possibly going to lose a couple. It's about marginal points, right? It's hey, even though I might be down in a category and I might be towards the bottom, but if it's going to take a lot to really gain in that category, you have a very large marginal. That's not the category that you want to fortify, even if you're down in points. It's the ones that you're very close to gaining and the ones that you are close to giving up. I think the difference really is how short a term you're looking here. If you're talking about over the final month of the season, there's not much of a difference in terms of fortifying and defending versus gaining. But in the last week, it really depends on whether you actually need the points or not. If you're in first place and it's about holding the lead, you don't need to gain, you're going to concentrate more in the defending. Right? If you're in third place and you're trying to make a jump to first, well, then you're going to concentrate more in the gaining if that's how you want to play it to try to win, right? So it really depends on your standing very, very much. Now, that more is about counting stats, but Ruvain, what about ratios? Because ratios, especially the pitching. Let's talk about pitching for a second. The ERA and WHIP can really come back to you. We had Spencer Strider pitching the other day, and he bombed out, and we dropped 2 WHIP points in the NFBC league that we're trying to hold second place, and we've actually got knocked out of second. I mean, obviously, you're not going to sit Spencer Strider, but what do you do in that situation in general in terms of attacking the ratios where, you could drop really quickly or somebody could drop into you?
Well, I think what you got to do is you got to start the right players now. That's easier said than done. You can't just pick anyone off the waiver wire and throw them in there and hope they're going to pitch 5 innings and pitch one run ball. And that doesn't always happen. A lot of times, if you're getting someone off the waiver wire and you want to throw someone in there, you're going to get maybe 5 innings, maybe 5 and 2/3 innings, and they're probably going to give up 4 runs or so. If your team can handle that, then you can do that. But otherwise, you're maybe better off just throwing middle relievers and having the relievers, boost your ERA and WHIP a little bit so that you can do that. I mean, you should have done that before. You should have been able to bank some ERA and WHIP points in order to be able to do this late in the season because this is the time that season to do it. But you also have to see how your team is trending. Like, let's say your team is trending in the wrong direction in ERA and WHIP. If they're trending in the wrong direction, and let's say hypothetically you have a pitcher like Sandy Alcantara who's now out, what are you going to do? Are you going to put in a pitcher off the waiver wire and have your ERA and WHIP suffer even more? Or are you going to put in a middle reliever, maybe vulture some wins like that, and do something like that? So ERA and WHIP are actually in the last month of the season are very volatile, and you can gain points quick and lose points quick just because people are throwing these starters that they wouldn't be throwing earlier in the year.
How much are you paying attention to the number of starters versus relievers that other teams are doing? So the teams that are right in front of you, right behind you, it's a balance, of course, of ERA versus wins and strikeouts. How much are you looking at the other teams in terms of the number of starters versus relievers that they are throwing?
I don't think I look at it that much. I'm looking at mine. I'm looking at how many wins are helping and strikeouts that I can get because wins are a crapshoot. You never know when you're going to get them. You never know your pitcher may go 6 innings, give up 1 run, and the bullpen can blow it. So you can't really bank wins. There's no way you can do that. And looking at other teams, yes, starts you can see maybe get an idea of how many strikeouts another team will get. So you may be able to engage whether you can gain or lose on strikeouts. But I think you should really just concentrate on yourself and make sure you start the quote unquote right guys and don't overthink it also because sometimes you can overthink and say, you know what, I don't like this two start. I don't think Spencer Strider has a good. I'm using Spencer Strider again. I don't think he has a good two start week coming up, and hypothetically, and he didn't have a good start last time. So overthink again. Don't start him. That's there's a trap when you can fall into that. Don't overthink yourself. You should go with what you've been doing the whole season and just trust the method.
I mean, Strider's at the top, but for marginal starters, I think it is a question of whether you throw an extra reliever or a starter in the end. I mean, you do have to look at the balance between where you are in marginal points and strikeouts, wins versus the ERA and WHIP, and it might lead you to say, oh, we've got some ERA to give, so yeah, fortify the wins or stuff. Or there's no way we can gain any more points than strikeouts. Make sure your WHIP and ERA are intact. That's important. If you are close, right, and it's hard to tell which to go, I think it does behoove you to take a look at what the other guys who are surrounding you in ratios or in the counting stats are doing. Oh, are they throwing more relievers? That means that their ERA is not going to move as much. That might give you a clue. So if it's not close, you have to look at your categories first. If it's not close, then you don't no need to look at other teams. But if it is close, that little bit of information could tell you whether to throw the sixth or seventh starter or not. I think it is worth taking a look.
And I also think it's going to affect how you attack Fab because let's say Adam Wainwright's on the waiver wire. Let's say Rich Hill's on the waiver wire. Are you going after those guys? Those guys, they have a chance. They can go 5 innings, but are they going to get you a win? Are they going to hurt your ERA and WHIP? Are they worth your last few Fab dollars? And when you can spend it on, let's say, if Brewster Gratterall, he's a lower down reliever, but he's a middle reliever. He pitches in high leverage situations and can vulture you a win, vulture you a save. I think sometimes you can spend your Fab in a better way instead of saying, you know what, he's a two-star pitcher. Let me just go grab him. You shouldn't really think like that because it may backfire.
So it is a question in terms of chasing wins down the stretch. I mean, I remember even just a couple years ago that, you're close in wins. Let's scoop up all the two-star pitchers or good matchups. I don't know if that's the case right now. I mean, pitchers, especially younger guys or guys coming back from an injury or whatever, they're not going the 5 innings, or they're barely going the 5 innings, and it's hard to even go after those wins, right? You thinking you're getting extra starts, but you're actually not getting extra win opportunities. Is it even worth chasing them? I mean, I guess if you've got 73 wins and you've got three teams at 74, and that's a couple of points in the standings, I guess. But I think that the drawing line in terms of whether it's worth it to try it is much, much lower today. Do you agree?
100%. If you look at the last five guys on the two-star pitcher list and most people this coming week, their ERAs are ungodly. You would not think of rostering them mid-June, July, May, April. You wouldn't the whole season you wouldn't think of, but now you are because you're desperate for wins. There's being desperate and there's being not smart. Being smart means you're better off getting a one-star pitcher who you think has a better chance of getting a win than just throwing out those two-star pitchers. Unless you don't care about your ERA and WHIP, like a couple of years ago, we didn't care about that. We just threw starter after starter. But again, that was before, and nowadays starters don't go as long as they used to, and they're really not worth it. I mean, you have to be smart about it. Your whole season is coming down to hypothetically coming down to the last 3 weeks of the season. Do you really want your season based on how, I'm just going to give an example, Jake Junis does on a two-star week, or if you pick up Tuki Tucson as a two-star, you don't want to lose your league because you're throwing those guys late in the year.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. You got to be a little bit more careful. Let's talk about some of the actual process of what to do and how to handle your team the last 2 weeks. And the one rule that you need to remember is that Fab does not carry into next year. It's use it or lose it. So whatever dollar amount you have for the last 2 weeks, plan to spend all of it, right? Let's say you've got 50 out of 1,000 left. How are you splitting that up in the last 2 weeks? Are you going 40 and 10, assuming that there's $0 bids? Are you doing 25 and 25? I mean, I guess it depends on who's available, but how are you? Usually, what happens for you?
Well, first thing you got to take a look at how much fab the people around you have also, because you have to base it on that. If you think that you can get away with $1 bids and still get who you want the last week of the season, then you can keep $5 in your pocket and do those, pickups the last week of the season. That's not a problem. And you can actually spend the $45 over the course of the next 2 weeks. There's no problem with that. But if other teams around you have the hammer, or they have or you have the same amount, do you want to risk getting those players now? Do you want to be locked out of those guys now? I think it's very, very important to know where you need backups in your lineup, who you need to have just in case people or players get injured, just in case you need to want to get more people who have more playing time. You have to use your fab wisely to the extent where you don't waste it and you don't leave any on the table.
Yeah, in terms of the actual dollar bid, you do need to look at who has the fab dollars, what is their maximum. If you've got 50 and the teams have 20, you know that they can't win a player for over 20, right? So if there's a player that you absolutely need, the bid is $21, right? Or the bid is 20 exactly if you think there's a tiebreaker needed, right? You want to bid the right amount for that. If you think that they've got way more than you probably are not going to get the player. Just throw the $2 or $3 in and save the rest for a different week, or save the rest for a secondary pick, or split it up a little bit more indifferently, a little bit more evenly, I should say, over everybody. In general, again, of course it depends on your situation, but remember, whoever you have, especially for hitters, is going to have an effect over 2 weeks if you have 2 weeks to go versus 1 week. So theoretically, it should be worth twice as much. Pitchers, of course, is matchup dependent, but remember that last week of the season, sometimes those pitchers don't even make that last start. So this week, the second to last week, is the one where you should throw more of the money for sure. And do watch what your other league mates have, because that's really the way to do it. The other thing that, Ruven, we always remind each other of, the very, very last fab period, the very, very last, where you're not saving any fab and you know who you're going to start. You could throw away anybody in your team, literally anybody. What you do need to make sure is your roster, in a redraft league, of course, I'm talking, has to have enough backup so that even if you have your roster set Sunday night, if your fab is Sunday, there could be a DL, an IL, I should say, heading into Monday. You want to make sure that there's a backup always. If you've got a league that has two different lineup periods, you make sure that there's tons of backups. In fact, catcher, I know why do you have to carry two? If you're in a one catcher league, why do you have to carry a second catcher? But that last week in the season, why not? You're not gonna. You're not playing some ninth starter on your team. You know he's not going to get into your lineup. Just drop him for a catcher or drop him for a multi-eligible position player, just so you can get, if you need it in that very last day, a replacement at every position, no matter what.
And speaking of the replacements, another thing we always talk about, or at least I always bring up to remind you, is you have to see which teams may actually play a 163rd game. That can happen, and that could make a difference. So you're probably better off picking up a player on a roster that may be in that situation, as opposed to picking up someone on the Athletics who may get more playing time, just because you may get that extra game. You never know what's going to happen, because I know there was one league that we did that it came down literally to the last 163rd game, and it does happen. And having those extra guys on your team who have the opportunity to have that, to play them for that day, makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it's so funny. I remember a couple of years where Gary Sheffield, of all people, made it to the last week, and we always think of Gary Sheffield as a home run hitter, but he stole bases. He would regularly steal bases, and he would steal them in September. And I remember thinking, I'm like, I'm going to pick up Gary. He's going to steal some bases. Sure enough, he stole a couple bases, and I don't think I won the league, but I believe I moved up a spot and won a little bit more money because I did that. So, yes, that is a good point. Sometimes you get lucky and catch that, and it's always about playing time, right? If you got 8 games versus 7, every game counts and matters. All right, let's do some waiver wire and pitcher preview, get you a couple of names. Ruvain, there's a couple of hitters that you would like to pick up this week.
Well, I'm actually going to go outfield heavy here, because it just seems when you're looking at the outfield waiver wire, you never really find anyone, but I'm going to throw some names out there for you to noodle on. First guy I'm going to mention is Akil Baddoo. He's only owned in 4% of leagues in CBS, but in the last week, he's only had 13 at-bats, but 3 stolen bases and batting .308. He may get some more playing time right now. Riley Green's on the IL. He may get some more playing time. He is in a platoon right now. He does sit against lefties for a lot of games. So look at matchups. You may be able to pick him up, get some stolen bases if you need that. Mark Canha. Mark Canha is very streaky, and this past week he's streaking in a good way. He's batting .450 with a homer and 4 RBIs, and even has a stolen base. He's a guy that he's getting more and more playing time. Listen, the Brewers traded for him. They're going to play him. They think he's a slight defensive upgrade for what they have. If he's going to play, he's going to get some playing time. He's available in most leagues. Jesus Sanchez of the Marlins, only owned in 11% of leagues, but he's batting .450 with 2 homers and 5 RBIs in the last week. And now with Jorge Soler out, he's going to get even more playing time. And because he's hitting, Marlins are in the playoff race. He's a guy they're going to keep in the lineup as long as he's hot, because he can carry the Marlins for a week or two at a time, and he can help you in your playoff race down the stretch as well. And one more guy I want to mention is Ramon Laureano of Cleveland, also in a playoff race. Sort of, kind of. I guess Cleveland tried to push in when they traded for all those players at the end at their own waiver wire. In the last couple of weeks, in those last 50 at bats, he's batting .300 with a couple of home runs, 7 runs scored. He's getting on base. He's playing almost every day, and he's only owned in 26% of leagues. He normally does steal. He hasn't stolen any bases the last couple of weeks, but he is a threat to steal. So if you need those steals, he's the guy to get.
Yeah, I'll give you my guys. Well, I had Mark Canha on my list. Past 3 weeks, .371 batting average, 3 homers, 10 runs, 14 RBIs, a stolen base. He's not a guy for a shallow league. He's a guy for a deeper league. And if you're chasing a certain category, he's not your guy. There's no one category that, wow, you need this, get Mark Canha. Unless it's like OBP. He's very good in OBP if you're in an OBP league. But he is a value. He's a guy who has a little bit in each. He won't send you spiraling down in any category. So if you're looking for a guy just to bank some stats, let's say your fifth outfielder's injured in a 15-team league, pick up Mark Canha. He would be a guy that could fortify stats and just keep the ball rolling. Give you a couple of other guys. Nelson Velasquez, very streaky. He's at it again. He's heating up. In the past month, 9 homers. That's a lot for a month, guys. 17 RBI, 16 runs. He's homered in each of his last 3 games. Yeah, Nelson Velasquez is definitely a guy that he's very interesting to pick up. How about Hunter Goodman? I think he was mentioned on a show, one of our shows last couple of weeks. 20% owned. He's got 7 games at Colorado this coming week. 7 games. And he's batting .323 so far since coming up. That sounds like a good play. And how about Luis Rengifo? I spoke just about the multi-position eligible players. Rengifo is eligible at second, third, short, outfield. I just picked him up in labor last week. 16 homers on the year with 6 stolen bases, batting .264. You can do a lot worse. In his last 2 weeks, he's got 5 homers, batting .446 with 14 RBIs, and he's batting at the top of the lineup, somewhere like around the 3 spot. They're shuffling him around a little bit, but he's somewhere in the top. Let's see if Ohtani can come back, give it a little bit of a boost there, but Rengifo is interesting. Yeah, that's who I got. Anyone else? Or we've covered a lot.
I think that's a lot, and I think when you pick up players, also look at their playing time. Don't just look at the average. Don't just look at the home runs and RBIs. Look at how many at bats they had, because if the sample size is very small, let's say I mentioned Akil Badul, he only has 13 at bats, but it's productive at bats. If you have a guy, let's say you want a guy for stolen bases, if he doesn't have at bats, are they putting him in as a pinch runner? Do a little deep dive and try to get that extra jewel that's out there.
Yeah, we say this a lot during the season, but it really applies at the very end for this. In your settings, if you're looking at the waiver wire and it gives year-to-date stats, switch it to last 14 days and sort by at-bats. See guys who are actually getting at-bats, or sort by runs who are actually getting on and scoring. Those are the stuff that you want to pick up in the final days at-bats. Playing time is king, as we like to say. All right, pitcher preview. Who is a pitcher or two that you might want to start? Now, you might be looking not just at this week's matchups, you might also be looking at next week's matchups, because they're going to cost money next week if they have a good matchup, so you might as well get them now for free, even if they ride your bench for a week.
Yep. And I think 2 guys that you should look for, even though I don't like any of the 2-star pitchers that are out there this week. I don't like any of them. I don't want anything to do with them. I don't think they're worth rostering. I don't think they're worth the risk to get the wins. So I'm going to mention 2 guys who are coming back from injury. I think we've mentioned them before, but if they're still available in your league, get them. First one is John Means. I mentioned him, I believe, even last week. He's only 34% on the CBS right now. They said they're not sure of his role. He could start, could go into the bullpen, but there are 2 other lefties in that bullpen. He's not going to close. He's not. He doesn't have closer material, even though Batista's out. He's not going to close. They're not going to put him as closer, but he has been a starter his whole career. The Orioles, they may want to see what they have with him for the playoffs, because they're going to make the playoffs. They may want to see what they have with him, and they're going to probably put him as a starter. So he's been pitching very well in his rehab assignment. So he's a guy, if he's available, definitely look to pick up. You can put him on your bench for another injured guy if you think another guy's not coming back to hold on to, because he may come back as soon as this week. That's something to watch for. Same with Walker Buehler. He's only 62% on in CBS, which means 40% of leagues have Walker Buehler available. The Dodgers said he's going to come back as a starter, not a reliever, which means he is going to start. And look what's going on in the Dodgers starting rotation. They got a lot of issues. Clayton Kershaw is playing through pain. Everyone knows what's going on with Julio Urias. He's out. There's a lot of stuff that's going on, and they actually may need Buehler come playoff time. He's been pitching well. He's been building up in the minors so far. He is almost ready. He's like 1 or 2 rehab starts away, so he may help you the last 2 weeks of the season. So if he's available, there's no reason to spend a buck or two if you want to do that and have him on your roster just in case.
That's so interesting that you mentioned all the injury returnees over here.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at the other guys who are out there, I have really no interest. And I always, when I'm looking at free agents, I always click on the injured guys first. I want to see who's coming back, or at least who I think is coming back sooner than people think, and go that way. And there's very little risk in dropping a guy who you're not going to play anyway, and picking up another guy a week or two in advance instead of having to pay more money on FAB for him.
Yeah, you don't find it risky to play injury guys though right away on the pitching side?
High level guys like not John Means as much, but Walker Bueller, I don't think that's an issue. I mean, how much you're going to get out of them? Like I mentioned, Clayton Kershaw is playing through injury, so he's not the Clayton Kershaw that you would normally get. So he's a guy that I wouldn't necessarily play just because you don't know how many innings he's going to go. But a guy coming back, they've been away for a full year and they already had 5, 6, 7 starts in the minors already this year. I don't have any issue. They're going to go at least 5 innings, I would think, 5, 6 innings, and they may give you a better chance of wins than other guys on the waiver wire.
Interesting. Well, my guys that I put together are more guys that are on the waiver wire with multiple starts or with good matchups or future two starts. So here's what I got: Jose Quintana on the Mets. He's up to 45% rostered on CBS. Two start versus Arizona versus Cincinnati. He looked good this year. His ERA is a little bit of a mirage because his homer to fly ball rate is only at 1.7%. Strikeout rate is very pedestrian at 18% and 10% walk rate. So even though he has a 3 ERA, he's not nearly as good as he's pitched, but he's still been effective. And, you never know. 2 games at home, pitcher's ballpark, you never know. I mean, the Mets need some innings, so, he might be the guy. Jordan Wicks at Colorado, at Arizona, and then versus Colorado the following week. He's been pitching well. 2.16 ERA, 13 Ks in 16 innings pitched over his last 3 games. I like the versus Colorado next week matchup. So you could use him for the 2 start this week. I like that start next week, so I would pick him up for that. Zach Davies, this is for deeper, 6% owned at the Mets versus Chicago. Strikeout rate is decent. So if you're looking to get strikeouts, again, it depends what category you're getting. He's going to accumulate a nice amount of strikeouts in that stretch. And Arizona is, somewhat in the thick of things. So that's interesting. I had reservations about saying this guy, Tuki Toussaint, and so far I've been passing him over. But he's versus KC versus Minnesota. Last 3 outings, 16 strikeouts and 16 innings with a 2.76 ERA. Caution with a blow up, but if you're desperate for wins, might be interesting. Here's another couple. Ben Lively. He had that terrible, terrible outing right before he got injured. Ignore it. Otherwise, he's actually been decent. He's at Detroit and at the Mets. And the following week, he's versus Pittsburgh. So if you need a guy with a couple of decent starts over the next couple of weeks, could be your guy. And here's one more guy. Javier Assad. He is a future 2-star pitcher. He is at Colorado this week. I don't know if you want that, but he's versus Pittsburgh versus Colorado. I like that to start matchup. They're on the year so far, 2.69 ERA, 1.18 WHIP. So all the guys I'm mentioning have been relatively good over the last couple of starts. I'm not going to give you guys who have just totally stink. Again, these guys are all caution. There's nobody that I love. But for the right categories, for the right team, and if you need someone to pick up in advance, those are a couple of options for you.
Now, I hear all those guys, and those guys are decent options, not great options, but decent options. But again, you have to be aware that these guys are close to bottom of the barrel starters to begin with. And what I'm curious, Ari, you asked me why I mentioned the injury guys. You know something? We haven't mentioned any of the rookies who were called up to pick up. We didn't mention Mason Wynn. We didn't mention Jordan Lawler. Are you against picking up rookies at this time of year and just go with the known commodities? Or are you willing to do that?
On the pitching side, yeah, I'm against it because why are they up right now? They're just filling in a cup of coffee. They're not going to last long, or you never know. On the pitching side, I mean, that's just somebody who can just crush my ERA. On the hitting side, I'm definitely looking. Guy we mentioned, Jason Dominguez, the Martian, as they call him. Oh yeah, I mean that guy is that could have an immediate impact. They want to test out. The hitters have less downside. The pitchers, they've got a lot of downside. So I'm very cautious about doing that. I don't think there's much upside to gain. If there were, they would have been up a little bit earlier than now.
So then, if you're putting in a bid, I would think that you're putting in higher bids for the rookie hitters as opposed to these lower pitchers, correct?
I'm not putting in bids for the rookie pitchers. And for the hitters, yeah, you're gonna have to bid a lot to. I mean, it's gonna be a high percentage of your fab. Odds are, whoever has the most fab is gonna get him. So it may not be like a strategy of, oh, if I bid this, like either you have the money or not. Jason Dominguez, you have some guy who just never used fab all year. Here you go. So you can be in 10th place out of 12, and you've got the fab, and you're out of it. But well, what the hell? Let's get Jason Dominguez for 10% of my fab. There you go. I think it's not a matter of the right strategy. It's whether you could or not.
Okay.
All right, up to injury report and last one of the regular season. What's going on?
Well, I'm not going to mention particular guys and go into detail with them. For the last couple weeks of the season, I'm going to give you a couple of lists. I'm going to give you the list of the players who are done for the season, and you can drop. Don't think about it. There are guys who are iffy for the rest of the season, and guys who should come back. So guys you should still hold on to, or even pick up if they're available. First guy I'm going to mention, first list I'm going to mention are guys who are done for the year. I mentioned Jorge Soler, he's done for the year. Sandy Alcantara, he's done for the year. If you're still rostering Anthony Rizzo, he's also done for the year. Carlos Carrasco had a dumbbell dropped on his hand and broke his finger. He's done for the year. Andrew McCutchen is also done. He has a partial tear in his Achilles. He's done for the year, but he said he's going to try to play next year. Gary Sanchez has a fractured wrist. He's done for the year. You can drop him. Danny Jansen has a fractured finger. He's getting seen by a hand specialist. They didn't say he's done for the year, but if he's getting seen by a hand specialist, he's not coming back anytime soon. Matt Manning broke his foot again. He's done for the year. Graham Ashcraft, he has a stress reaction. He's done for the year. Michael Soroka can't stay healthy. He's done for the year. And Jason Adams is a pitcher, relief pitcher, who actually he had an oblique injury, a side injury. Pitchers take a little bit longer to come back, so I can say that he's basically pretty much done for the year. The guys who are iffy to come back, Mike Trout, he said he wants to come back. Whether the Angels allow him, that's a good question. Same with Ohtani. Ohtani seemed like he was running in the field. He was running before the game today and yesterday. He's moving around. Looks like he's trying to play through it. He will try to play unless the Angels say no, and the Angels don't really have much say about it. I think his agent will let him know what to do. Patrick Bailey is on the concussion list. He's iffy to come back. Joey Bart was called up. He wanted another catcher and take someone. That's fine. Riley Green, he's slowly rehabbing an elbow issue. He should be back. Marcus Stroman will be back, but I don't know if he's going to be stretched out as a full starter. So I don't know if he's going to get 4, 5, even 6 innings when he comes back, just because he may not have the time to build up that strength. And Felix Bautista, he's very iffy to come back. I'd actually put him closer to the done for the season because you haven't heard anything from him, and I think they're keeping mum on it for now. I think they know what's going on, but they don't want to say anything yet, so I think that's the issue with him. And guys who should come back, Bo Bichette, he's already doing wind sprints. He's going to come back. He's coming back from only a muscular injury. Byron Buxton is going to come back, but probably as a DH only. He actually had his rehab paused for a little bit, and now he's back on it, and we'll see. He'll probably just be a DH. Joey Votto looks like he will come back if you want looking in deeper leagues. I mentioned Walker Buehler. Kyle Wright. He's going to be back. The Braves want to see what they have with him. He's going to be back activated either next week or the week after. He said he already said his rehab is done. It's up to the Braves to do what they want to do. Adolis Garcia has a knee injury. He has a patellar tendon strain. He's on the IL. They said he's going to come back. I'm not too sure. I'm not 100% sure. So he's a guy you may want to, hear more info about him, what's going on before you actually drop him. And a guy who you mentioned, who I said I didn't think he was going to come back, but I think he will come back, and that's Edwin Diaz. I think he will come back. He's trending toward that way. I think he wants to pitch maybe the last 2 weeks of the season. I think it's going to come down to that. Will he close? I don't know, because I don't know if the Mets want to put him into that situation. But I mean, I can't see Edwin Diaz coming in the 8th inning. I don't know about you.
Yeah, that's not going to happen for the Mets. It's not. Question, and we're not doing trivia today, but can you? Byron Buxton, by the way, has had his second most healthiest season since 2017. All right, last year he had 382 plate appearances. This year he was almost second healthiest. 347 plate appearances. You know what his stat line is? You know what his homers, stolen bases, and batting average was this year?
I know he wasn't hitting for average, but I still think his homer. I think it was like 15 and 10 or close, something like that.
Yeah, pretty good actually. 17 homers, 9 stolen bases, which is a lot for him. He stopped running, but he did run a little bit. Batting average, 207. Yikes. I mean, what is Byron Buxton's value in? Is he going to be drafted high up next year, or this guy should be drafted really low.
No, he's gonna be drafted lower. I think. Well, here's a good question: who do you draft higher, him or Starling Marte? Starling Marte is gonna probably have another surgery in the offseason. You get him for stolen bases. He gave you some of that this year, but his batting average wasn't there either. So, I mean, going into next year, I think I may want Buxton more than Marte because I don't know how much Marte is gonna play. I think they may I think they may get drafted around the same area in the draft. That's what I think.
Yeah. Starling Marte is the number 359th highest value player according to the Razzball Player Rater at -$1 this year. Buxton actually is just a touch higher. He's still low down. He's at 306, worth $1. So, yeah, they're probably same range. I mean, Buxton, though, to me, has not as good as profile because, I mean, I know he stole 9 bases, but probably going to be less. It's just a power guy with a crap average. Starling Marte, though, has, a little bit better batting average. I know he wasn't as good as last year, but let me look it up. His batting average this year, 248, but it's not 200. I mean, 200, you're playing Buxton, 200 kills your average. I mean, that's bad, and that doesn't seem unnatural. Like, that is who he is. His strikeout rate is over 30%. It's creeping up. It's just not a good situation. That fizzled out pretty quickly.
But then you also have to factor in their ages. Starling Marte is going to be 35, I think, and
That's
Buxton
true.
is actually turning 30 next year. So they're both on the wrong side of 30. Marte has shown that he's been able to steal still, even with the problem that he had. And I think that the Mets may have a better lineup a little bit than the Twins next year. I don't know what the Twins are planning on doing because they're a pretty decent team. So they may make another splash like another shortstop who's injured, who's not going to make it through the full season also next year. I'm not saying anything about Carlos Correa, but you never know. I it's a matter of the lineup I guess they're in, and you have to see during spring training how they're playing, if they're running at full speed, if they're saying they're having any soreness to begin with. But I think those are two guys that if you want a fourth outfielder, a fifth outfielder, I think that's the range they're going in.
Yeah, Carlos Correa worth $3 this year. 17 homers, 230 average. Thank God the Mets didn't sign him long term. I mean, that is just a bust of a profile. I never liked him from a stats point of view. I think totally overrated every year. He had a good season in 2022, batting 290, 22 homers, but he's and he hasn't been very, very injured. I mean, he's putting up so far about 550 plate appearances. That's not bad.
And I think the San Francisco Giants are happy they didn't sign him either.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And Twins will be a playoff team, so I guess they did it right. I guess.
They went for it this year. They're gonna. I mean, that division is so bad. They just that little bit extra than what they had there before can make the difference. So that's why they did it.
All right, so that's the story. Ruvain, it's been a great regular season for you. What's going on with you?
Well, you can continue to follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I'll continue to tweet the injury updates as they come. I'll be doing them in the off season as well. I still have a couple more weeks of my Rotoballer in year during the season article that comes out every week to help you with your fab pickups. And if you have any questions about injured players during the course of the season, and even if you want to talk a little bit about football injuries, I can talk about that just a little bit if you really want to. You can just DM me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, and I'll give you my best medical opinion.
All right, I'm Ariel Cohen over at Fangraphs over at Rotoballer. ATC projections, there's going to be one more rates update. It's going to be early next week, and that'll be the end of the update for the season. The playing time will keep going, of course, to the end of the season. So ATC will update overnight, but the rates will have a little bit of a bump in next week. And that's the story. Wishing you a lot of success down the stretch. We hope that our advice has happened. I've already got a couple of different tweets. It's not a tweets. What are they called now? Posts? Reposts?
They're called
DMs?
post and repost, I guess. I don't know
I
the
don't
true
know.
terminology for it.
I'm gonna say tweet because that's what it is. But people have messaged me and said, thank you so much. Your show has been great. The projections have been great. So I hope the rest of you find success and hope that we have helped you over the course of the year. Start with the preseason and all that. We'll be back after the regular season to recap and look toward 2024. And so we're excited for that. Ruven and I will be down in Arizona. If you want to catch Baseball HQ's first pitch, Arizona, you definitely should come to that. Fantastic program there. We'll both be down. I think we'll be doing a podcast again live. That would be awesome. It's always a great time. It's a great show. And, of course, they've got tons of other panels there and games. And there's even drafts there. I mean, they've got it all. It's a whole weekend of fun. So hopefully you can join us there. And that's it. Anything else to wrap up the season, Ruven?
Nope. I hope we were able to help everyone. I hope my injury reports help people manage their roster more efficiently, because that's the idea. You got to make sure you know who to hold and who to drop, and that's very important. I mean, I follow my own advice. If you look at my waiver wire pickups, they're the same waiver wire pickups. A lot of them I mentioned on this show. I know you do the same. So we practice what we preach, and we hope we were able to help you during the course of the season.
Yeah, one thing to note, and somebody once asked me this, but like, do you guys actually listen to your own advice? Yeah, I mean, we're just telling you what we do, and all of the things that we're considering, we do it. This is our own stuff. I consider myself a fantasy player first, then analyst. It's about the winning, it's about the playing, it's about the strategy and the game theory of doing it. So I'm first that, and second analyst. I'm just reporting what I do, and hopefully that helps other people.
Yep, I agree. I mean, it helped us this year. I think all our teams are so far in the money right now. So, following our own advice seems to be working. So hopefully you followed it to a certain extent as well, and hope we were able to help you.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for us here. Once again, thanks so much for listening. Good luck in the rest of your weeks, and until next time, we'll see you later.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.